neurotypical children don't need to know who their classroom is and who their teacher is. Neurodiverse children need to know, and their parents need to know, because many of my children co-regulate. Now, if there's only a 50-50 chance that'll be the teacher, tell the family and child that. But 50% is better than nothing. My experience is it's probably an 80% chance this is going to be the Year 2 teacher. And don't tell me we don't know, because guess what? Most teachers know by the last day of term 4 where they are going in term 1. So even if we will let you know on the 18th of December who your teacher and classroom will be. But please understand there might be changes, things happen. Sometimes things happen and we get that. But please understand, for this child and family, it is so important. Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. Well, hello everybody. Have you ever been to a different country or moved states? Or what about started a new job? I'm guessing you've all done that. Well, I often think for children with neurodiversity, starting a new school year is as big as all of those. They say moving is actually one of the most stressful things you can do in your life. In fact, I think the third after death and divorce. And that's for neurotypicals. So imagine for a neurodiverse child with ODD, ASD, PDA. Now, don't worry. If you don't know what all those letters mean, I've got you covered, because I've got an ebook to go with this podcast that has what does that acronym mean, that if nothing else, I recommend you download the ebook and print out that page so you have a list of all the acronyms and know what they mean. Anyway, for any of my children, moving just to a new teacher is a big deal, because one teacher says, pack away, and one teacher says, hurry up. Like, we use language. One teacher does we're finished and assumes you know to pack away. So it's very important that we help children understand what this new country, what this foreign country feels like. Just like if you go to a new job, even if you're a teacher teaching in a new schools, there's different routines, there's different cliques, there's places you can park, there's tables you can sit at. Teacher assistants, going just from one teacher to another, how different each teacher can be, different rules, different expectations. Imagine if you are neurodiverse and you don't pick up on those social nuances, what is called the hidden curriculum, the hidden rules in a classroom or a peer group. Can you imagine how anxious you would be? And this is why I think we need to prepare children now. Now, even if it's January or February when you're listening to this, it isn't too late to prepare the child and go back and put in place these strategies. But I don't know about you, I feel like the years are going faster and faster. And I feel like, how did we get to the end of the year? Well, don't you worry. I've got you covered. I've got an ebook full of tips. You don't need to search the internet and think about, what do I need to do? I've got an ebook full of tips. And then my cheat sheets that I send out every year. I've just revised and updated them this year. I always revise them. And these cheat sheets are what teachers and educators want to know next year about this student. They don't want a big file, just little tips. Who were their friends? Who did they work well with? Did they do homework? Didn't they do, just give me the little cheat sheets to get started. How did they go in the playground? Just those cheat sheets. And I call them cheat sheets because they're like a shortcut rather than reading all the documentation. And like this year I've added in, because more and more kids, I suppose in Australia with the NDIS, are seeing OT speech psychologists, like what allied health professionals is this child doing? And I sort of go, why didn't I have that in the past? But I think because in the past, not as many students saw allied health professionals, and knowing who they're seeing is really helpful. So there is a podcast that'll explain the cheat sheets and how to use them. So that will be next week. So listen out for that. Okay, just take a deep breath. I think I need one. I don't want to overwhelm you. So back to this week. This week is all your tips for transition. And I have added in new tips for this year. I always revise these things every year. So if you've got the one from last year, I highly recommend you download this year's, because I've got a new cover with tips on that. Plus, I've got a whole lot of new things in there. But what I find is we need to start transition now. And the reason for that is the end of year with concerts and all the things going on, there's not a lot of capacity to then do the transition. So I always think November is the best time to start transition because some of my children need more visits than other children. Now, some of you might be going, but Sue, we don't even know who the teachers are or who the staff are. This is an argument I have with schools every year. Neurotypical children don't need to know who their classroom is and who their teacher is. Neurodiverse children need to know, and their parents need to know, because many of my children co-regulate. Now, if there's only a 50-50 chance that'll be the teacher, tell the family and child that. But 50% is better than nothing. My experience is it's probably an 80% chance this is going to be the Year 2 teacher. And don't tell me we don't know, because guess what? Most teachers know by the last day of term 4 where they are going in term 1. So even if it's, we will let you know on the 18th of December who your teacher and classroom will be. But please understand there might be changes, things happen. Sometimes things happen and we get that. But please understand, for this child and family, it is so important. If we want a smooth transition, then we need this in place. Now, if you're saying there's just no way we will know, then keep the teacher assistant the same. The schools I go into where there is a huge churn of staff, we keep the teacher assistant the same, because at least if they have the same teacher assistant for the first 4 weeks until you know your funding and your staffing, at least there is one familiar face for that child and the family and the carers. So I just want you to try that on for a moment. I want you to think what a difference it would make to the child and the family, but also the teacher. If a teacher has never had a neurodiverse child, they deserve the holidays to maybe do my courses over summer and do the summer school, or to listen to a few of my podcasts, or doesn't even have to be mine, but get there, find some information to understand this child. If they're getting a child with PDA and they've never heard of PDA, being able to listen to the 2 PDA podcasts I did this year that have been the most downloaded episodes, by the way, which just shows people want to know what is PDA and what to do, then that is really important. So I will let my high horse run away, but I just want to remind you, the more we prepare, the better for everybody. Everybody. It's so important. So I really believe that we need to think about what is important. And I create what I call my shortcuts by putting together these ebooks for you. So you can just hopefully sit down with a cuppa and have a read of these. So on the first page this year, I've put acronyms and abbreviations. So if you don't know what PDA is, you can look here and go, oh, pathological demand avoidance. Okay. What's SIB? I see that on a lot of reports. Oh, serious injurious behavior? Best I know about that. Okay. So all of these things are on there and you can have a look at all of those. And then I've got my key tips for transition. And as I start off with, transition includes a change in teacher, a change in room, a change in students in the class, not just starting preschool to school, primary school to high school. In this tip sheets, I've got post-school options too. They're the big transitions, and we tend to be better at planning for those. I'm talking about the little transitions too. Both are important to put in place changes. So here's the things I believe. Number one you need to think about is actually the sensory. Many of you have heard me talk about Michael, who was my first student with autism, who really has inspired me for the last 30 years. And without a doubt, his biggest overwhelm from going from home to school was sensory. When a child moves from home to preschool, lots of sensory. From home to school in a classroom with 25 children, and often just in that one space, often in an early childhood setting, there's more places the child can go and find some quiet time. And I find when moving into one confined classroom, or you might have a big open plan space, so it might be different, but often my children can't find that little quiet nook they need. And then primary to secondary, moving 8 classes a day, all the movement and touch. But I find primary to secondary, the sensory is often about all those movements. And Anna Tullemans and I share in our the Essential Guide to Secondary School, about for her son Daniel, she would take him to a big Westfield shopping centre and get him to practice walking in and out of shops, because that's what a secondary school's like. All those people spilling in and out of shops, walking, looking at their phones, not looking at you. Well, we are banning phones, which is good. But if you go into a lot of secondary, a lot of kids aren't looking where they're going. It's just like being at a big shopping centre. But I also find with those transitions from in secondary, often it's about the uniform, moving to buttons. So what are the sensory you need to think about? Does the child actually need to wear leather shoes now, and they're used to have been wearing their favourite little sand shoes? What are the differences? So we need to think about sensory. We need to think about people. Who will be their teacher assistant? Which students do they know? Who do they go to for help? Is it the teacher assistant, the teacher, or a peer? Do you do the see to, then see me? And are there other staff in the school they need to go? No, learning enrichment, learning support. Who are some people they need to know? Some of my children, the office staff, are really important because they might get dropped off there in the morning because of separation anxiety. And I've got some tips of separation anxiety at the back of the book, which actually come from parents and really, really helpful. Visuals. Now, the main visual I would like is a map of the school. I am a big fan of videoing too. In this day and age, you can just get your phone and video the school. You're not putting it up on YouTube. Video the office staff saying hello. It's one of my key strategies, actually doing that videoing. But I like a map of the school. Where are the toilets? Where are the library? Where do you hang up your bag? Where are the lockers? Like an actual physical map. Because remember, my students are visual learners. So knowing this information. For some of my students, if your school has you're allowed on the equipment Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, having that information visually written down, allowing them time to process and look at that is so important. So my next tip is to video on your phone or iPad. Video the teachers saying hello so they get to know that teacher's voice. Video your early childhood setting, where the parents will park and where they come in. Video the drop and kiss. What are all the video, the whole thing through the child's eyes so they get to see what it looks like. I like to video the locker areas in secondary so they get to see everyone coming in, slamming, noises. Don't visit a school when they're empty. It drives me mad when schools do transition, when all the other kids are on camp or excursion. The school is never going to look like that. The oval is never going to look empty. The handball court is never going to look like that. How is it actually going to look when the child is there? What are the noises, sounds? Maybe record the school bell so the child knows what that bell sounds like. Actually the real situation, not the blank situation. Because remember, many of my children have trouble generalizing or problem solving that. So you show them an empty toilet block. Well, is it really going to look like that? Are children going to be coming and going? Are there going to be hand dryers on? Of course we're not going to video the toilets as such, but showing what that space looks like, where they're going to line up, show it with lots of children. Think about how the spaces look with people in it, because that helps the child then problem solve and process. I also love Anna Tullemans has a I'm Going to School book, which is on my website. I like to do that every year. It is fabulous. It actually has all of these things laid out, like a photo of the classroom, photo of where to put your bag, photo of your teacher, photo of your teacher assistant. It's brilliant. So photos might include the class teacher, important staff, toilets, bubblers, fountains, whatever you call them, or the box that have the water in it. Remember, many of my children don't know how to access toilet, food, drink. So show them where that is, okay? And do they have friends? Do they know anyone? Parents, this is where I'd love you to do some networking. Find out if they don't know anyone. Find out some children. Organise some play dates in the holidays. Often in my preschools, what we get the children to do is actually sit in those tables for eating of who's going to which school, so the children get to know those children. So for the last couple of weeks in preschool, you might wear the uniform for next year. You might sit in those groups to eat. You might Connect the parents up. Preschools, this can be an invaluable part of your role in helping a child getting ready for school. So, and in that I'm going to school book, you might include the photos. The other thing for children transitioning to school is I highly recommend How to Stop Your Words from Bumping, which is another Anna Tullerman's book. I'm just looking. These are all at the back of the ebook. I did include them. So the I'm Going to School and How to Stop Your Words from Bumping. How to Stop Your Words from Bumping is a whole lot of social stories that Rhonda and Anna, who are both parents, set up, wrote for their boys to understand rules at school. So it's things like how to ask for help, how to sit on the mat, how to line up, how to say sorry. And it's a whole lot of what I'd call getting children ready for school social scripts. And parents of older children who might be struggling socially, I highly recommend those because they teach those what I'd nearly call manners in schools. They're like little social routines. Like at home, you don't put your hand up to ask for help, but the children need to learn those as part of school routines. Neurotypical children pick them up. Neurodiverse children often don't pick up these little diverse changes. I still remember once taking my class to McDonald's when I worked at an autism school, and one of my boys sat down at the table at McDonald's and put his hand up because he needed to order the food, but he thought that's because we're in a school group, that's how you did it. Doesn't that make sense? I can still see him sitting there beautifully with his hand up. He didn't know you lined up, so do children know you line up at the canteen to order? In secondary, what does your canteen look like? Do they collect their own food and go to the checkout? That's different to primary school where they might have asked, yes? So these are all the routines we need to think about. And the more we can share, the better, okay? But really put yourself in a child's shoes. Think what is important to them. The other thing is, the lunch routine. This includes practicing the lunchbox. Can they open all the things in there? Parents, don't rush out and buy a new lunchbox at the start of the year. Get it now. In fact, there's more in the shops at the end of the year than the start of the year. Is there a zip? Can your child unzip? Can they undo their tiny teddies, or do you need to put them in a container? I mean, I would like them to be doing that because that's a great fine motor skill, opening those little chippy packets and tiny teddies. Oh, any of you going, oh, Sue, they're not very healthy. I know. I would prefer the child was having cucumber and tomato, but many of my children actually have sensory issues with food, and we also need to accommodate that. Many of my children don't eat at school because we put in place these very rigid rules around food and drink that don't accommodate my diverse children's sensory around food. Again, this is where your occupational therapist might be able to guide you. And I'm always working towards children eating a range of food, but many of my children actually, they just can't. We must understand the stress around food. Do listen to my podcast on that. It's a much earlier podcast on, I called it fussy or picky eating because with podcasts, people search by those sorts of names. But in the podcast, we go into AFRED and we go into all the challenges children have around eating. So if a child is asthmatic, do we go, oh no asthma sprays? Other children will want asthma? No, we happily accommodate that child's asthma and we might accommodate their exercise. Well, if children don't eat, drink, or go to the toilet, it impacts on their learning. And my children need to eat at school because otherwise you'll get hungry, angry, you get a whole lot of emotions. So please think about how you're going to accommodate their eating for transition. Do you need to start to get them not only ready with the containers or what they're going to come in, but do you need to look at, eating a range of food? And if they can't, then I think it's not fair to ask them to do that. So this is where we need to communicate between home and school. What about a calendar? Personally, I love a calendar to show when we're going back to school so we can cross off the dates, when's the end of the school year. When I teach, most states now, year 6 is the final year of primary, but part of transition to secondary, I like to go and get their diary from the school the students are moving to and photocopy November and December and actually get the child to use that school diary so they can see, do they use day 1, 2, 3? So we start to get used to that language. Teacher assistants, I would love you to do that. That's something teachers often don't have time to do. But I often find my teacher assistants might know some children at this high school that they taught previously, or be able to contact the high school and just get a copy of that diary. Personally, I always, for all my children, because I think we need to make calendars a functional tool, all my kids always have, you can just print out the Google month calendar and cross off each day as it finishes. But also teaching older children to put things in their Google Calendar can be very invaluable, like teaching them, well, there's a school closure day, or next year, when's Easter, when's the school holidays, like putting that all in. All of us like to know what's coming up. And what I know, when my children know what's coming up, they don't fight for control. So teaching them that routine of crossing off the days, putting on their upcoming concerts or end of school activities, all of these things will help children get used to referring back to that. And I recommend you all consider doing that. Yes, even with 4-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 24-year-olds. Remember, same strategies no matter what age. And how are they going to get to school? They're going to bus, they're going to walk, they're going to train. We need to practice that routine. And again, I would video that. I also recommend if children are catching the bus, you practice the what to do if something goes wrong. You might even write a social script and put that in their bag for an emergency. I highly recommend if children are catching a train, you practice them getting off accidentally a stop too early, a stop too late. Or one of the things that happened to my children is the train went express through our station a couple of times, which doesn't happen very often at our station. So I think we've all been caught with that, where we just see which line it is, but we forget to check if it's stopping. So practicing all these things are really important. One of my mums, bless her, just beautiful, big shout out to Lyndall if she's listening. Her son stayed on the bus till the end because he didn't get off at his stop and then he didn't know what to do. And she was incredibly stressed not knowing where he was. And he just stayed on the bus when it went right round until it got to the bus depot. And surprisingly, the bus drivers are often not educated on our diverse learners. And probably the bus driver said, "Are you all right?" And he would have said yes, because he was all right. But did he know where to get off the bus? Like, what's a better question? Remember, your words matter. My guess is the bus driver asked a question that he answered literally and didn't know how to ask for help. So that asking for help, if you miss your bus or you lose your phone or you can't find your bus, your train ticket, we need to practice all those things. And last but not least, what are the calming strategies that child needs in that environment? What helps keep them calm? Are they a child that need a weighted thing? Are they a child that needs a break? Are they a child that needs ADHD, needs physical movement to calm? Do they need a sensory tool? What do we need for that child? So for children starting school, I've got some great tips I recommend you go and have a look at. I have covered all of those, a lot of those already, talking about their lunchbox, their drink bottles. And I've also got some tips for orientation. So make sure you have a look on page 5 for children starting school. For children for transition to work, that is on page 6. And I've got some great tips there from Yen and from their book on getting ready for work. Really important, volunteering, starting volunteer jobs now, doing a go to work day, doing all these things now. November's a great time, like go to work with a parent or a family friend. Go and volunteer and do some volunteer work. If they've just sat year 12 or HSC, getting them that summer job. And I'm sure you've heard me talk before, I'm a big fan of franchises because I actually train the children. So McDonald's, Baker's Delight, Subway, they really have good systems to train our young people. So, and they'll also be working with other young people and getting to network and meet some new people through that. And it honestly looks really good on your CV if you've worked at many of those franchises, because they know they train them. So, and they often start with shorter shifts, and I think shorter shifts are great. So have a look at the transition to work. I've then put top 10 tools every school and home needs, because often people email me going, "Sue, what do I need?" And these are my top 10 recommendations. So I highly recommend have a look at the top 10 tools that every home and school needs, everything from the ultimate guide to school and home, to, kids on the syndrome mix that explain each of those, what each of the labels or diagnosis mean. And then I've got 13 separation tips for separation anxiety. And these have little quotes from my beautiful community. These come from my Facebook community. They are amazing tips and strategies that will really help you understand many of your children, what they need in place, what the family need in place. And for families, that separation anxiety is very intense for them and their children. So I highly recommend you look at that. And then if you've got a child transitioning to secondary school, I'm hoping you've listened to the podcast with Joan Shanahan. But what I've included in the ebook this year are her tips. So there's the must do, the ideal to do, and extras for great success. And if you listen to my podcast with her, 168, that is jam-packed with amazing strategies that Joan has put in place. And she worked in out of the Armidale. So she's worked with a lot of regional and kids coming from remote into big secondary schools. So her tips are invaluable. So I highly recommend that. And then I have actually included a whole lot of other tip sheets that will be helpful for you in my Making a Success book, Essential Guide to Secondary, the early years, from anxiety to meltdown, I'm going to school, and how to stop your words from bumping, and those books. Then I would love you, if you are a teacher getting a child next year, to think about doing one of my courses. So if you're in the early years, you might want to look at doing my Developing Early Childhood Approaches to Children with Additional Needs. If you are in secondary, I would highly recommend Tony Atwood's course. Or if you haven't done my course, this is a great opportunity to do my course. Now, with any of those courses, they all build on each other. I call them my foundation courses. I would recommend that you definitely do mine and Tony if you're working with year 5 and above. If you're with children under 5, then I'd recommend you do mine early years and my Making a Success course. Then I have my more specialized course, which is like emotional regulation, social skills, teacher assistant courses. So you can look at doing some of those. And I highly recommend that. Summer is a great time to prepare yourself for students. So if you're getting a child on the spectrum or with neurodiversity in your class next year, I actually think, I know you'll be like 5 hours to do a course. It is going to save you hours of stress. And you would not believe how many people watch those courses all in one hit. A few years ago, an early childhood educator did my course, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I binge watched it. It was the best thing. I wish there was more." Yet I'm sure when she started it, she didn't feel that way. I also have some upcoming live virtual workshops. If you're a person that prefers to watch live, and I get that, I'm more a face-to-face or a live person, like give me a day in my diary to sit down and do this. So I highly recommend you look at joining me for those dates in November. And I'm trying something new. In January, I'm going to run a live virtual, because if you want to join me from anywhere in Australia for a live virtual workshop, we're going to do like a starting the year off with a workshop online on Zoom. Now, my Zoom workshops get as good as reviews and evaluations as my face-to-face and my online. I think it just depends on your learning style. So as always with the live virtual workshops, I'll be sending you out a goodie bag with some lollies and sensory tools. The January one, I'm thinking I'm going to add in a few extra goodies, because if you're joining me in your holidays, the January one, I will be making the Queensland PD date, because I'm very conscious. I get a lot of requests to go to remote and rural areas in Queensland. And honestly, from Sydney, it often takes a whole day out of my diary to get there and a whole day to come back. I am doing some of those over term 4 where I have more flexibility. But I feel like it nearly becomes exclusive that I can get to you and I can't get to other people. And my mission is always to help as many of you as possible. And some of your small remote schools wouldn't have the budget to get me there, because it is expensive. Flights are still really expensive. So I always try and get cheap airfares, but it's getting harder and harder. And not only that, the hire car prices. Oh my goodness, I feel like it's highway robbery. Some of the hire car costs now. So the advantage of live virtual is, if there's 4 of you in a school, you can sit together and do it. And that is actually really cheap training compared to getting me to come to your school or organisation. Or, I've had schools of like 10, like in South Australia last year. We did one, a live virtual, where there was a few schools that clustered together. It was fantastic. And they just sat in groups in their school of like 8 to 10 staff in a room. So they were networking, chatting. It was still a fun PD day. I sent the packs to them. I sent lollies. And it honestly was really, really fun day. So I highly recommend, have a look at my website, what dates they're coming up. Enroll now. I probably will cap those days because I like to make them interactive, engaging, and I like to, on Zoom, keep it at a level that we can do breakout groups. So if you are on your own, we'll always do breakout groups so you get to network with other people as well. We only do a few breakout groups along the way, but it's just a nice way if you're on your own to connect with other people on the day. So I hope you can join me for those. So remember, there's quite a few things happening. There's the ebook to download on transition tips. There is the cheat sheets that will be next week's podcast. Plus, think about joining me for a live virtual workshop, whether it's in November or January next year. I can't wait to see you soon in one of those forums. And keep an eye out for my email about what do you want to learn about next year, rather than me bombarding you with too much information. I hope this makes a difference to you and the children you know. If this podcast and ebook's been helpful, please share with someone else. I really believe that it's so important. So often there's someone out there that you know that might be feeling overwhelmed right now, and just sending this and thinking of people is so important. Actually saying, hey, I know you've got a child with separation anxiety. Here's some great tips that Sue shared. Or I know you've got a child starting school next year. Here's some great tips. Or you're worried about your child transitioning to work. Well, here's some great tips. I've really got you covered on all those different ones. So I really hope this makes a difference to you and the children you know. And as always, if there's any questions or ways I can help you along the way, just send me an email. I'm always here to help. I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out, and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Attwood or my online courses. For more information,